Good evening. Thanks to my cheering section. I appreciate that. Wasn't that a great video? Beautiful. I am here tonight to introduce a man who stepped up for Michigan and for Detroit at a critical time in our history. Mayor Dave Bing took on one of the most demanding jobs in the country at a very difficult time for our city. Not a lot of people would be willing to tackle a challenge that steep, but Mayor Bing has and continues to do so. It is truly my honor to acknowledge Mayor Bing for all of his efforts over the last 4 years. Mayor Bing took office and immediately began efforts to right the ship by restoring integrity, ethics, and transparency to City Hall. Detroit is on a better path today, and we have Mayor Bing to thank for that. Mayor Bing has been instrumental in engaging the private sector and business leaders in Detroit's revitalization. He continues to bring the same vigor and intensity, as well as humility, to City Hall that he did on day one, and we should all acknowledge his continued leadership for our great city. And here to interview him this evening is Detroit Free Press editorial writer Nancy Kaffer. Now please join me in welcoming and thanking Mayor Dave Bing.
Thanks so much, everyone, for being here today. And we don't have a lot of time, so we're just going to jump right in.
Jump in.
So the city owes you an important debt for restoring integrity to the office of the mayor after the Kwame Kilpatrick era. That is certainly something that had been really damaged, and you brought that back. But an important part of your legacy has to be the inability to control the city's finances, leading to the governor's decision to send in an EM. What could you have done differently that could have stopped that from happening?
I'm not sure we could have done anything differently, because you're talking about a 40 or 50-year issue in terms of the financial situation we found ourselves in. When you talk about a $15 billion debt and long-term liability issue, you don't solve that in a short period of time. So that is somebody else's issue at this point, and glad that's not me.
So you talked about how it was, a problem decades in the making, and how kind of difficult it is to make those kinds of changes. You had, plans about streamlining government or reforming government, bringing expenditures down. It was incredibly hard to put those plans into place. Does this mean bankruptcy is inevitable?
Well, bankruptcy is something that I think this administration had worked very diligently over the 4 years to stay away from. And hopefully we don't go there, because it will be a negative impact not only on our city, but on our region and on the state. So I'm hopeful we don't go there. But once again, that's a decision that will have to be made by the emergency manager. And I don't like to talk about bankruptcy because I don't know a lot about it.
Okay, but do you feel like the expanded powers of the EM then might be sufficient to make some of the changes that we all know need to happen?
Well, Kevin has powers and authority that I didn't have, and that's his training, that's his background, and I think he's using it at this point judiciously to make sure that he can use it as leverage more than anything else. He said to me more than once, "That's not where I want to go." But at least it's on the table. And if I have to go there, nobody is going to like it.
So one of the things everyone is talking about is whether or not the collection at the DIA is vulnerable in the case of a bankruptcy filing. What's your opinion on that?
From a personal standpoint, I'm very hopeful that we don't have to touch the art over at the DIA. From a cultural standpoint, it's a mainstay in our city, in this region, and in this country. I know that it's an unencumbered asset of the city, but it's something that I've heard and read about most recently that, there's a lot of folks that are very upset that if in fact that were to happen, we don't know what the next step's going to be.
So there was a lot of outrage and outcry over the DIA collection, which is really, really justified. It's certainly an asset to the region. No one wants to see the collection damaged or separated or harmed or broken up in any way. But a lot of the folks, a lot of the outcry has come from suburban residents who may be people who grew up in the city. What do you think about this, this sort of wake-up call to the region that this Detroit's, it seems like a lot of people have suddenly realized that Detroit's financial problems really do impact them, whether they live in the city, whether they have never lived in the city or grew up in the city?
Well, it's a wake-up call, I'm sure, but once again, from day one in my administration, I've been very supportive of regionalization. And even though I represent Detroit, I do understand how important the region is. Detroit's a part of the region, a very important part of the region. And we started off with Cobo Arena. Everybody said, that's something that couldn't be done. We were paying $15 to $18 million a year to support Cobo. When we made Cobo Arena a regional asset, we no longer had to come out of our general fund with that money. And now we've even it's $289 million or so that we're expanding and upgrading Cobo, and everybody's looking at it as something that should have been done years ago. Glad we did that. And from a regional standpoint, there are other things that I think we're doing. When we look at the Water and Sewage Department, they had been under a federal judge for 37 years. No longer. That's a regional asset once again. From a regional standpoint, we talked about something for 40 years that we were never able to accomplish in regional transportation. So I think the people in the region do understand now that Detroit is important, but the region itself is equally important.
You mentioned DWSD. That's another asset that's been talked about as possibly available to generate revenue. Do you have thoughts on that?
Don't want to see that happen either, but once again, I think we have to take a step back and look at the bond market and say, if we're going to ask people to take a haircut, have we done everything that we should be doing as it relates to assets? And I hope we don't have to sell off assets, but those are huge assets today that are in our inventory. There are some smaller things that we were looking at selling off. For example, the UAW building downtown. We have a deal that I hope we close in the next 30 or 45 days on that particular building. The firehouse, we're going to sell that off. So there are smaller assets that we want to sell off that won't have a negative impact, I don't think, on the city or the region. But we've got to be very careful when we start talking about the DIA and DWSD.
Now, you've had kind of a mixed set of responses about Kevin Orr. You were very supportive when he came in, understanding the situation. And then you've said some things that were more critical of him. Where are you now on Orr?
Well, first of all, Kevin and I like each other personally, and I think professionally we respect each other. But I'm not going to always agree with Kevin in terms of things that he may choose to do, nor will he agree with a lot of things that I'm asking him to do. So this is going to be a situation over the next 6 months that I'm in office that I will give him my input. I'm not afraid to stand up and say I don't agree with you. But in the end, he has the authority from the state to do what needs to be done to try to set our city on the right track.
How much did his appointment influence your decision not to run?
None at all. I've been a team player going back to my first career. So I do understand that the team is more important than an individual. So I wasn't hung up from an egotistical standpoint that I was the mayor and no longer had the authority, the accountability, or the responsibility to make a lot of final decisions. That rests in the hands of the emergency manager. I respect that, and I will work with him as best I can.
So talking about your future plans, are you really serious about running for Wayne County? Because that is a very hard job. Probably as hard as running as mayor of Detroit. The county has a lot of the same problems as the city does.
Well, as I was making a decision whether to run for mayor or not, there were different people that I talked to who said, you ought to think about something else. We think that you've done some heavy lifting, you've done some good things that you haven't gotten credit for, and I didn't do this to get credit. I did this to help. And so they said, Wayne, Wayne County has some of the same problems that Detroit has.
Yeah.
Maybe you could think about that. Well, I'm not going to close the door on it, but at the same token, it's not something that's foremost in my mind right now. I got almost 7 months in the mayor's office.
Well, but, as you said, Wayne County has a lot of the same problems as Detroit, and it has a lot of the same impediments to affecting change. So do you think that you would be able to be more effective in Wayne County than you had been able to be in Detroit?
Well, I'm not sure of that. That's why we're putting a committee together so that I can get some intelligence in terms of how the county is run, what's the strengths, what's the weaknesses, how is that administration set up. I don't know the answers right now, but I'm open-minded. And my thing is this: I'm healthy, physically anyway. And so if I think that I can make a difference, I can help, I can add value, I want to do that because I've been in Detroit now for 47 years. And Detroit has been a problem for a long time. It's starting to right itself. I think we're going to come back. And if Detroit comes back and the county doesn't come back, we're still going to have major problems in the region.
But you had also talked about kind of the time commitment that being mayor required, these 70, 80-hour weeks. I don't know, I've not asked Bob Ficano how many hours a week he works, but I'm pretty sure he doesn't clock out at 40. Is that something that you thought about?
From a time standpoint, I'm old school, so I get to work pretty early. I get to work about 7 o'clock or 6:45, and I don't get home to 9 or 10 o'clock at night. What I don't like anymore is having to work every weekend and have to work, another 12 to 14 hours on weekends. I'd like to try to get that back. Whether or not I can do that in another political capacity, I'm not sure. But once again, that's why I got this committee out there really doing the legwork, letting me know what my responsibilities would be.
Now, as the mayor, you've always talked a lot about how difficult the job was, and people asked you whether or not you were enjoying yourself or having fun. If I recall correctly, you haven't just said no, but sometimes hell no. So I guess in retrospect, two questions. In retrospect, do you wish you had been a little more, upbeat about some of the challenges? And do you think that could be problematic if you're trying to get a job taken over another problematic or troubled government entity?
I think the first thing you got to do is be realistic and then be honest. These jobs aren't fun jobs. Right. Even in good times, I don't think you have a lot of fun. It's hard work. And so I don't want to take credit for things that we've done because I believe in a team. I'm very fortunate to have had a lot of great people around me that have helped me achieve some things. And if I do anything else, it's really about the people around you. They're the ones that either make you or break you.
So to change tacks a little bit, you've told us that Representative Sam Singh of East Lansing is planning to introduce a bill in the legislature that would reinstate residency requirements for new city employees. Talk a little bit about what that could mean for Detroit if a bill like that were to be adopted.
Well, I want to thank Representative Singh for this legislation because I do think it's important. If you were to go back and turn the clock back to 2000 when residency was no longer necessary to be an employee of the city, it gave people the opportunity to leave, and obviously a lot of folks left. The people that were most important that left, in my opinion, were the public safety officials, the police and fire. Because when they were in neighborhoods, in the community, people felt a little safer. But now with over 50% of them no longer living in the city, not only don't people feel safe anymore, but you also lose the tax benefits that you were getting, whether it was personal tax, income tax, et cetera. So we lost somewhere to the tune of over $50 million over that time frame that we surely could use today. So for new employees, we're talking about if you're a new employee of the city, you have to stay in the city for 7 years before you can leave. In 7 years, a lot of things can change, and I'm hopeful in 7 years we'll see the city change and people will want to come back to the city.
No, but this would apply to new hires only. So is the city going to be hiring enough new employees anytime in the foreseeable future to really kind of move the needle on this?
I can't say that with a lot of sincerity right now, and the reason for that is that there are a lot of things that will happen in the next 16 months under Kevin Orr as the emergency manager. I do think we're going to lose a lot of our employees, especially those that can retire. And I do believe that there's a need. You talk about the brain drain. We have that in city government also. So we're losing a lot of people with a lot of history. And we've got to get some new young people coming in, and hopefully we're going to be growing the economy, growing the city of Detroit, as opposed to just outsourcing everything.
Do you feel like this kind of bill has any chance of passing the legislature?
I think it has a chance. I think it makes sense not only for the city of Detroit, but other cities, other municipalities around the state. And so I'm hopeful that the legislators that are up here this weekend will be talking to a lot of them, will be supportive of this.
So we're getting pretty close to the end of our conversation here. So, but going back to the city and its financial struggles, you had, the report given by the pro bono turnaround team that began right around the time you took office. There was the short-lived operations restructuring effort. There was the McKinsey report. If there were one thing from those reports that you wish that you could have done that you feel like really would have made a difference, what would that be, and how could it have been achieved if you had a chance to do it again? Well,
I think we've made a lot of structural changes. Example, you can't cut your way out of this situation. And so as our revenue continued to decline, just in personnel costs alone, over the 4 years, we've cut $350 million out of our budget. And I think that's hurt us because right now, we're not able, from a resource standpoint, to have the people to do the things that are necessary to provide the services back to our citizens and businesses in the city. Everybody says the biggest problem that we had was one from a financial standpoint. I think it was from a structural standpoint, and we couldn't fix that quick enough, and that's why the governor lost confidence, I believe, and was frustrated and brought in an emergency manager, because the emergency manager has much more authority and power than I have as mayor.
Okay. Well, and I think we've just pretty much wrapped up our time here. So thank you, Mayor Bing.
Well, thank you, Nancy.
Conversation.